everyone, so this is our third and last video in our series on the musculoskeletal system, and we are going to be focusing on muscles. Now, muscles by definition are any tissue that allows for movement. So it's tissue which contracts and relaxes and allows for movement. Now, based on this, we actually have 4 key functions of muscles. Now, since by definition a muscle tissue allows for movement, our first function is movement, that muscles allow for your body to move. Now, we have 2 types of movement, voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary is movement that you control. Involuntary movement is movement that happens automatically. So things under voluntary control, talking, walking, writing, all of those, you control the muscles that are doing that movement. Things under involuntary control, your heart is beating, you're breathing by your diaphragm and your intercostal muscles contracting, swallowing, your stomach churning food, undergoing the digestive process. You don't have to think about that. So anything that happens without your conscious thought, involuntary control. Anything where you think, I want to move my hand or I want to write this down, is voluntary control. The second key function of muscles is posture. A lot of muscles are constantly contracting and relaxing to keep your body straight. So very important in maintaining proper posture. Third is joint stabilization. Because remember, in our previous video where we talked about joints, muscles play a very, very big role in the movement of your bones and also in the stabilization of those joints. We have tendons and we have ligaments. And tendons, they connect muscle to bone. So tendons are extremely important in the joint stabilization process. And last but not least, muscle contraction is actually really important in releasing heat. So every single time your muscles are contracting and relaxing, they're using energy. And some of this energy is lost as heat. And the heat is actually used to maintain internal body temperature, which we know is 37 degrees Celsius. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our 3 key muscle types. Our first is skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle is defined as muscles that are attached to bone and muscles that allow for movement of bones. So if we're looking at the picture in the top right-hand corner, this is actually showing our 2 muscles that we have in our upper arm. So we have our bicep and we have our tricep. And if we're looking at our diagram of our skeletal muscle, we'll actually see some key things. First, that it's formed in fiber bundles. And what we have is we have repeating units of fiber bundles. Second thing that we notice is that we have these bands in our fiber bundles, and those are called striations. The third thing that we notice is that we have lots of nuclei. So skeletal muscles are considered multinuclei. And when we look and when we recap our the cell structure, again, the nucleus is where we have all of the DNA, which actually controls the function of our cell. Because skeletal muscles are attached to bone, they are under voluntary control. Now, all of these things together, the fiber bundles, the striations, the multinucleated cells, produce 2 things. It produces muscles that can generate high force, but it's also muscles that have low endurance. That after a while, they tire. So if we look at the next slide, we're actually going to see a type of skeletal muscle zoomed in. So we have our skeletal muscle, and we can see it's accumulation of muscle fibers that are brought together. We can also notice right here that our tendon is connecting our muscle to our bone. So we have, again, our skeletal muscle right here, and we can see those striations. And if we're looking at our X-ray image, so this is our X-ray image, we see those banding patterns. Okay, our next muscle type is our smooth muscle. Now, our smooth muscle, it lines the muscles of our internal organs. Now, the reason why smooth muscles are referred to as smooth muscles is I can see that I have no striations. So I don't have any of my banding patterns. I'm also single nucleated. Now, because our smooth muscle lines our internal organs, it is involuntary. I don't actually have to think about it for my muscle contractions to take place. Now, all of these things together produce muscles that have low force, but high endurance, because they're constantly contracting all the time. So if we're looking at our smooth muscles, so this is actually underneath a microscope. We can see that our muscles are individual cells, that they have individual nuclei, and that they're very smooshed together. But I don't see that striation pattern that I did in my skeletal muscle. Now, our last muscle type is our cardiac muscle. Now, because it is called cardiac muscle, this is only found in the heart. Now, because it's found in the heart, the cardiac muscle is also a type of muscle that is under involuntary control. I don't have to think about my heart beating. Now, cardiac muscle is like a mashup of all of the best characteristics of skeletal muscle and smooth muscle. So one of the things that we see here is I have our striations, and this allows for that high force to be generated. I also have my cardiac muscles that are actually branched. And because it's branched, I have simultaneous contractions. So that means my cardiac muscles contract at the same time, which makes sense because my heart is basically a pump. Well, it's a double pump because I have my left side of the heart, which is a single pump, my right side of the heart, which is again another pump. So I have two pumps right here. And I want my muscle fiber to contract at the exact same time. So the branching allows that to take place. My cardiac muscle, because it is pumping non-stop, also has high endurance. So key characteristics: involuntary control, single nucleated, it has striations, the fibers are branched to allow for that simultaneous contraction all the time, and it is both high force and high endurance. So we can see right here, we have our image of our cardiac muscle, and this is our microscope slide. And we can see that it has that traditional striations that we see from our skeletal muscles, and we can actually see that we have branching, so they're connected to each other. The last thing that we need to talk about with muscles is this concept of antagonistic muscles. And we see that in our skeletal muscles. And what it is that on any skeletal limb or bone, we actually have two muscle pairs that are on opposite sides of the bone. So what we actually see right here is the muscles that we would actually see in your upper forearm. So what we have, if we're looking at this, is we have our bicep and tricep, which are on opposite ends of our humerus in our upper arm, and then in our lower arm we have our ulna and our radius. So if we're looking at image number 1, when the bicep is contracted, our tricep is relaxed, allowing the ulna and the radius to go towards the humerus. So what's actually happening right here is our flexion. That the angle between the ulna and the radius and humerus is decreasing. In image number 2, the opposite is taking place. As our bicep is relaxing, our tricep is contracting, and what we're actually seeing right here is extension, that our ulna and radius, the angle in between the ulna and the radius and the humerus, is increasing. So we actually have antagonistic muscle pairs everywhere throughout your body, and this allows for our skeletal muscles to have that full range of movement. I hope this helps, and have a great day.